Welcome to Psychological Explorations with Dr. Michael Axelman.
And Daniela?
And John.
Today we're going to continue our exploration of the work of Phyllis Greenacre, a psychoanalyst who worked out of New York City. She was associated with Nipsey. And you can find her collected works in a 2-volume series entitled Emotional Growth: Psychoanalytic Studies of the Gifted and a Great Variety of Other Individuals. Today, we're going to be exploring her paper, The Impostor, which was published in 1958. And in this paper, she takes up the topic of particular type of person, okay, who changes the name and identity and past history of who they are and present themselves as somebody that they are not. And when we look, broadly at the actors in Hollywood, I mean, a very high number of those participating at a high level in Hollywood have changed their name from their birth name. We also have politicians who have done the same, musicians, people who have risen to high places and become famous very often have transformed themselves from their birth name and their birth history. Not always, but there are certainly some general trends. And today we're going to explore the psychodynamics behind the imposter through the wonderful paper by Phyllis Greenacre. So the imposter, the definition that she puts forth. An imposter is not only a liar, but a very special type of liar who imposes on others fabrications of his attainments, position, or worldly possessions by presenting himself with a fictitious name, history, and other items of personal identity. A plagiarizing on a grand scale, making claims which are grossly implausible. So this is the imposter. She brings together the 3 constellations of disturbing symptoms that one finds in the history of the imposter. And we begin with dominant and dynamically active family romance. Endurance past puberty of Oedipal dynamic. What is sometimes referred to as this, it's a misnomer, but it's been called an Oedipal victory. The attachment was extreme. The parents were at odds. The mother frequently despising, reproaching, or attacking the father, who either remained detached from the child or removed himself by death or desertion. Uncontested supersedence over his father. Infantile narcissism favors a reliance on omnipotent fantasy to the exclusion of reality testing. The infantile narcissism takes over the field in the absence of the involved father and doesn't find any limit or anything to contain it outside the self. And it's reinforced through the relations with the mother. And there becomes this compulsive pressure throughout development to live out the family romance, a living out that has the force of delusion. The imposter seems to flourish on the success of his exhibitionism. So it's very performative. There's this move to engage in a performance, an exhibitionism that's primarily directed towards the maternal audience. And the second area is the intense and circumscribed disturbance in identity that Greenacre refers to. It is from the confirming reaction of his audience that the imposter gets a realistic, quote unquote, sense of self, a value greater than anything he himself can achieve. So the way that the identity is really reinforced through these maternal interactions and this reaction of this particular audience showing an interest in this aspect, this performative aspect, playing the role. And finally, the third point is malformation in the superego, both in terms of conscience and ideals. The idea from Freud that the superego is the heir to the Oedipal complex, right? It's through that resolution that a healthy superego becomes established. The significant nuclear disturbance, however, appears to consist in the weakness of any strongly established principles of behavior involving consistency in reality testing. So the weakness of any strongly established principles of behavior involving consistency in reality testing, the reality testing remains poor. And the imposter is imposing the subjective onto the objective. So this necessitates, right, incorporation by the mother. The child is incorporated and fused with the mother, and this necessitates the killing of the father. Insofar as the imposter is accomplished, it is the killing of the father through complete displacement of him. It further serves to give a temporary feeling of completion of identity, sense of self, that can be more nearly achieved in this way than in the ordinary life of the individual, so impaired by having been psychologically incorporated by the mother. So the sense of self is so incorporated, so fused with the mother. The term enmeshment is often used to describe that particular dynamic. And it's that fusion, that incorporation that necessitates, right, the killing of the father and the replacement of him. This is definitely an Oedipal victory of the very worst kind. So in order to summarize Greenacre's key points, the acting out of the imposter is largely an attempt to achieve a sense of reality and competence as a man, more than to claim the mother in any deep sense. So she understands from the child's perspective that what's trying to be achieved primarily, right, is the sense of reality and competence, this identity aspect of achievement, more than laying the claim on the mother in a relational way. It's delivering the goods to the mother rather than laying claim on her that becomes primary, according to Greenacre. And she brings up on a sidelight, a really interesting comment that I think deserves repeating. And it's related to the ethics of reporting case material. And Greenacre notes challenges, right, with reporting specific case details on such patients like this. And she says, I quote, "While it would be unfair to publish anything without consent of the analysand, this still does not resolve the problem. To see their own life histories in print may, in any event, be too great a narcissistic injury, even though permission has been given for such publication? So it's a very deep question about whether somebody who is, in fact, psychiatrically ill with some form of deeper mental illness, whether they actually have capacity to consent for the release of clinical material about their life. And she suggests that the narcissistic injury caused by such a thing may be too great and may not be understood in advance. Right. This concludes our discussion of Phyllis Greenacre and her paper, The Impostor, which was published in 1958. Please join us for the second part as we move into discussion.